Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the Bell 47, this very unique helicopter that came out very recently. It is an interesting handful, and it's not a bad thing, but definitely old school, Let's get started. So first things first, when you climb inside this thing and take a look around, you immediately realize this is definitely the early days of helicoptering. Not only is it the early days of helicoptering, but you look at the instrument panel here and it's like, really? Kind of thing like that. And of course, you turn your head and you look at the back and you're like, this is what you sit in the middle and this is your communication radio. And the answer is yes to all. By the way, it's just kind of one of those aircraft. There's a couple things to give us which kind of help us out. And if you actually float down here, they have this neat little thing in here where it's kind of fun. You can come in here and dial in some little details as far as your departure and stuff like that. And you can get like a little GPS and everything that you can kind of fly around with, which is just, I don't know, it's neat. It definitely feels like something I would have on my phone, just kind of like sitting there kind of a thing. And of course, if we go under setting, there's a couple different toys in here, and we'll go ahead and kind of take a look at the different toys. One thing that's kind of fun is you can put the rain cover on if you want to do instrument flying. Don't recommend it. Of course, the other thing we have too is there's this cool thing called windshield data mark. And if you turn that sucker on, if you look straight ahead, you'll actually see now there's this little line there. There's actually a moving horizon. We can't see this right away, but once we get in the air, you'll see it actually bend back and forth. It acts like kind of like an artificial horizon, so you don't have to look out the window all the time. And the reason that's important for me is my head right now is straight. When you first load this helicopter into the game, it's going to be tilted down like this. And it's just different. So anyway, so the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to get this thing going, and we're going to be kind of careful with it. One thing that's a little weird with this aircraft is you'll notice the throttle kind of being worked right here. This throttle, it's the way they have it set up depends on what you've done with the setting here. If you put this on auto mode, it's going to govern itself. If you put it on manual mode, it's not. And we're going to talk about what that is in a minute. But the key thing here is when we get this thing started, if you have a pitch on your throttle for propeller pitch, you want to go ahead and pull that all the way back. Just kind of one of those things. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the mixture handle. We're going to slam it all the way up. This is the anti-ice. Not worried about that just yet. We have ignition. We're going to hold off in the ignition for a moment. You've got your battery and generator switches, and of course, you have your lovely little fuel switch. I like the idea that just click. Not much to it, kind of a thing like that. And then, of course, coming down here, we can switch between oil temperature as well as transmission. I'm going to leave that up on there. We got a couple little things here that we have for switches. Obviously, the governor is our best friend in the universe here. We definitely need that. And you'll see why once we get this thing started. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. I'm going to go ahead and pop these two switches real quickly here. You get this fun little bell checklist. It's like a little light that comes on. I mean, like, look at this. Isn't that so cool? I don't know. It's just old school. Now, if you want to, you can actually come over here and shut off the classic cockpit. And it gives you this magic box over here with like a modern transponder and like a really nice modern GPS. But I don't approve. So we're not going to. So, of course, one of the nice things here is they give this little scroll knob, and you can, like I said, kind of go up, down, and check flight controls and all that sort of thing. It's just so cool. But this thing's really easy to get started. It just takes two hands. So I have my hand on my starter. I have a button on it, and it's going to be this little button right here. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and crack the throttle a little bit. It needs a pretty good amount of crackage there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to pop the fuel switch on just like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to crank it. And as soon as it goes around once, we're going to go ahead and slam the magneto to the start position. So I'm going to go ahead and crank it. And we're going to pop the magneto over. And if you listen carefully, and just like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play with my throttle a little bit, and I'm just going to get this going here. It's going to do a little bit of a dance as it rides on the, basically the clutch there. And I'm going to hold it at about, we got about 1,000 RPM. And I'm just going to back the throttle out a little bit. I'm just going to hold it there. And again, the big thing that you got to keep in mind here, not to confuse everybody, is the outer ring here is your engine RPM. This is your rotor RPM. And you'll probably observe very carefully the engine right now is about 1,200 here. I'm going to go ahead and back the throttle out just a tiny bit. That's pretty high for us. The other thing we want to check, of course, looking down here is we want to make sure our temperatures are coming up. We want to make sure oil pressures are coming up. Cylinder temperature is good. Transmission temperature is apparently the exact same thing as the engine temperature. Seems kind of strange. I don't know. It's just sort of one of those things. The other thing we're going to do while I'm down here is I'm going to reach over here. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to click this thing on. But before we do that, we're going to kind of stabilize the RPM ourselves. Notice as we start to warm up a little bit, it speeds up. So what I'm going to do is just slowly roll the throttle forward here. If I roll the throttle, what I'm doing is I'm pushing my propeller pitch handle forward. Now, where this gets really interesting here is it's going to want to run away from you. And it's just kind of one of those things that you have to kind of be ready for when it happens. I'm going to give it just a little bit more power here. You can see it's coming up nice and smoothly. I like how it's got a drain pressure. Oh no. What if we needed that? You never know. You want to see in the dark or something like that. So anyway, again, I'm just gently bringing in the power here. We don't need to crank it. And see how it's starting to pick up and accelerate on us? We got to be very mindful of that. And you can also see my manifold pressures come out quite a bit. I appreciate the red line here, but I think there might be a bug related to the manifold pressure. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to catch it, and I'm going to try to get it right into the green there. And all I'm doing is playing with the controls and getting that right inside that range there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come down here. I'm going to go flip on. Oops, I'm not going to flip on the throttle. What I'm going to do is flip on the governor. And what the governor will do is it'll attempt to maintain a constant RPM. And it'll basically, if you look really carefully, you can watch the throttle kind of do its little happy dance here as the RPM is now stabilized automatically for us. Just the important thing is you got to bop that button. Otherwise, you're going to have a real fun time having to crank the throttle while you're manipulating the collective on this. So that works pretty well. I'm just going to hit the home button there. I don't really need it. I know where we are. I don't have to worry about this too much. So everything's good now. This is basically the warm-up phase now, and we're going to make sure everything's kind of cooking. That's looking good. My cylinder's incredibly hot. That's actually disturbing. It shouldn't be over 200 degrees anyway, but it is what it is kind of a thing. And I do see the generators working properly. Oil pressure is plenty right now. My altimeter's set correctly. Manifold pressure is going to do its little happy dance later. This is good. This is good. Feel good. Feel good. Check, 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 check. Notice, by the way, how little fuel this thing carries. It's nothing. Like nothing as far as fuel goes. And you'll chew through it very quickly. All right, let's go over this helicopter's weirdness. So I'm not going to pretend to be the world's best pilot when it comes to this helicopter. It's too funky, and I feel like I'm a combination of fighting a flight sim system as well as fighting this ancient, old-school, unstabilized helicopter. But the key thing you have to keep in mind with this thing is that it's like, what's the best way to describe it? It's like a big spinning top, and it's going to try to resist you in a different way than some of the helicopters you probably operated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick my head up a little bit here. Now we're going to go ahead and test the controls real fast. And the first thing that will shock you is the amount of collective required to get airborne. And again, this is going to be a function of how heavy are you right now. It's also going to be a function of things like are you have high temperatures? Are you at any like high weights, like I mentioned before? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull the throttle, and not throttle, I should say. I'm going to go ahead and put the collective about halfway. The collective right now, as you can see, is about halfway off the floor right now, and this thing hasn't even jiggled, just to give you an idea of just how little lift this thing produces, because we just don't have the power that a modern helicopter has. So I'm going to go ahead and apply it a little bit. As you do this, what you're going to want to do is make sure you got your hand on the cyclic, and as you can see, my hands at my feet are automatically starting to compensate for the expected twist of this helicopter once it comes off the ground here. And all I'm doing is giving it just a little bit of left foot there, just a little bit of left foot. So for me, my throttle is right around 75%, and we're going to start lightening up on the skids. You see how the aircraft is starting to get a little light? And now at 75% power, I'm just starting to lighten up on the skids here. So the reason I like this step is this gives you a good opportunity to kind of feel what it's going to want to do. See how it wants to crouch forward a little bit? And again, we're just enjoying this little kind of light helicopter here. So there's 75%, and we're just going to come a couple inches off the ground here. Now, this helicopter is a little old school, and the governor on this thing is not as good as a modern governor, so it's always going to be kind of wondering, especially if you make any changes. So we're sitting here about 8 inches off the ground. Now, this is where the first weird thing comes in, and I think the developers did a really nice job with this helicopter, but the controls have this weird damping to them, and you can see how I'm wiggling the controls, and it's kind of doing its own thing there, and that makes it a little harder to fly. But right now, as it stands, I actually do not have my hand on the collective. I have it on my knee right now, and just to give you an idea of how stable it is as far as altitude goes. So once we're up in the air, you need a little bit of collective there and a little bit of anti-torque there just to kind of get it. And it's just a matter of kind of feeling what it wants to do. And again, that weird dampened quality to it makes it a little bit easier to handle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to release some pressure right now, just on my right foot. So my rudder pedals, or of course the anti-collective, are basically going to be neutral. And now one of the things you're going to observe is the whole helicopter sinks onto the ground and bounces. Did you see that? And the reason it's going to do that, of course, is because as I'm increasing the demand of power, the whole thing kind of stalls on itself. So you just have to kind of be mindful of that when you start manipulating this helicopter. It's really, really tempting to, of course, jam a bunch of collective in there when it starts to sink, which is what you're supposed to do. But the key thing is now you would have messed up everything else. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make our way over to the runway nice and gently here. And again, this thing's going to get really, really translation lifty as soon as you give it any lack of attention. So you just want to kind of be mindful of that. And again, my leg is still sitting right there on my knee, just because once you get the collective set properly, it's relatively easy to control at low altitudes, unless you're taking your pirouettes, your nice fleet turns, as opposed to tipping the helicopter where you need to go. Now, as far as this helicopter goes, because of the way they've engineered it or modeled in this game, you really don't have to worry about manifold pressure or carburetor temperature, which just feels scandalous to me, but it's just kind of the way they did it. So we're going to come sneak over here, of course. So in the real world, we look up to our left to make sure nobody's coming in for landing on runway 1. It's been really nice weather here recently. recently, so of course some people will want to go and do all sorts of landings here. And everybody loves to come to this part of Connecticut because this is our absolute shortest runway in Connecticut. So what we're going to do here, not shortest runway, what am I saying? It is the shortest tarmac runway in Connecticut. So what I'm going to do this time is, as I make that turn, I'm just going to give it just a tap of collective because I know that it's going to get really sinky when you use just your feet there. And we're just going to kind of let it settle. There we go. Going back that collective out, and we're just going to enjoy a couple inches off the ground here. Looking pretty darn good. So this is pretty good now. We've got ourselves lined up down the runway. Everything's ready to rock. You'll notice I'm not really paying any attention to any of my instruments or anything like that. This is the world's most visual helicopter, other than, like, I don't even know what's more visual than this. So we're going to go ahead and do a standard running takeoff here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip the controls forward. I'm going to apply just a tiny bit of collective. And then as we start to pick up speed, I'm just going to gently back off our anti-torque pedals down at the feet. And the helicopter is going to suddenly pick up speed and start to climb into the air just like that. And as you can see, as we climb here, it's very easy to control. Like I said, we got a bit of a crosswind, which, yup. And we're just going to make our way kind of over into the sky here. Now, climb speed for this one's relatively straightforward. You'll notice that I'm only using, what do we got here? 15 inches of mercury. That doesn't seem very reasonable. Right now, my collective, if you take a look down here at the floor, I've got it at about the 75% point, and my engine temperatures are pretty darn nominal, so it's pretty good. We're climbing here, doing about, we're getting a little slow, actually. We're doing about 25. We should be climbing at about 35 to 40. This is not a speed demon. And people say, of course, can I get this thing to go up any faster than that? Well, you could increase the collective, but let me go ahead and show you what happens when we do that. So I'm going to go ahead and crank the collective towards me here. You'll notice my manifold pressure is just about 20 inches now. That's pretty high. And you can see we get a little bit better climb here. That's not bad. Again, it's not bad. This is not a high-performance helicopter. This is really an ancient helicopter. So I'm going to go ahead and back my collective about, let's call it about 80% right here. Now, this gets me in a pretty comfortable spot. So we get a nice view here of Summers up in the distance, and of course, Islington's chilling there behind us. So this helicopter doesn't have any fancy technology when it comes to navigation. This is usually the part when I start talking about, using the navigation or using the HSI or the GPS. But we simply don't have that in this helicopter. And I don't hate that in the slightest. I actually think it's great. One of the things is I do love it. Remember, at any point you can come down here to the settings page and you can go ahead and activate the more modern cockpit. I can do one of these things. I'll give that a few moments to kind of load all in and everything like that. It says, do you want to do this? You press the enter key. You've got yourself your good old-fashioned regular GPS. Plus, this is kind of handy. It's a transponder. Kind of need this thing. But you don't really need it. That's just kind of one of those things that's kind of neat. Like I said, I respect that quite a bit. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and take our nice left turn, and we're going to start making our way back down towards Ellington Airport there. Turning on this aircraft, very, very, very simple. The only thing I warn you about is it has this weird tendency to kind of sink. And that's very true for any helicopters because, remember, not only lift is going up anymore. But more importantly, when it sinks, when you try to respond by pulling back, you get in this weird seesaw motion, which gets very, very, I would say, uncomfortable for the passengers. But at the same token is you lose a lot of altitude with it. So if you're one of the people who likes to do a bunch of hot dogging, which, let's be honest, folks, why do we fly helicopters? We fly helicopters to hot dog. So, yes, hot dogging is a great expression, by the way. So, of course, if we wanted to do any hot dogging, we just want to be mindful of that. When you take those really aggressive turns through, the major cities, it's going to sink. That's just kind of the nature of this older helicopter kind of thing. Really, like I said, all helicopters in general. So we're going to go ahead and start our descent here. You want to be mindful of how fast you descend. You don't want to come down too fast here. I'm going to go back to regular classic cockpit there. Just because helicopters like to chop their own tail off if you go too fast. That's more of a real-world thing than it is, of course, in the sim. One of the great things that I love about helicopters that you can't do with an airplane is I can actually take that little reference mark on the horizon there and I can actually stick it on the horizon and I can back the collective back about, I would call this about 50% collective right now, and I can just leave it right there on the horizon, just like you see right now. And if you look out the window, you can see we're doing a good solid about probably 450 to 600 feet per minute descent, which is plenty for us. And we can actually, of course, if we want to tip over a little bit, we can come down a little bit quicker. But the big thing is don't combine reducing collective and pitching over. That's a great way to lose a tail. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're doing this. So the wind today, of course, is coming out of our right side of the screen. It's the west direction, so we'll kind of take advantage of that. Just kind of enjoying a nice little ride down. Again, this thing is just so darn peaceful. I love helicopters that just do this. And we'll get a good look, of course, at that weird sinking effect in a second. See how it's starting to do that little bit of pitch as it sinks rapidly? You just have to be very mindful that you lose a lot of energy in turns with this helicopter, maybe more so than some of the other ones that I've flown around in this program. So we'll come around here, and I'll go ahead and start getting ourselves all squared away. Or the Harley-Davidson looks kind of empty today. That's too bad. And we're going to get lined up and go plop ourselves back from where we took off. Now, just like any helicopter, as you get slower, the aircraft is going to get very, very, very heavy. It's like going to just start sinking on you. Just remember that as you start to slow down and as you start to bring that collective up, the two forces are going to make your feet have to work a lot harder, in which case you just want to be very mindful of that. Another thing that's great, too, is if you look at that little datum reference up on my little windshield there, you can see very, very clearly the fact that we're slightly nose up at the moment, and that's just kind of how it is. So there's our landing spot just ahead. All I'm doing now is manipulating the collective. I'm trying to keep the cyclic basically as gentle as I possibly can here as we come swinging down with this, like I said, absolutely classic helicopter. I'm swinging across here. Looks pretty good to me. One of the things I love is it's got that old VHF radio right on my left there. That's a VHF. That's your COM1 radio, by the way. You can see right now it's a 118.30, so we can go change that if we need to. It's just kind of fun. I also like the fact that it's got the nav comm switch, but it's like, and just how are we expected to navigate with this if we have no instrument that shows us the communications that we are receiving here. I'll go ahead and sneak myself down. One of the things we did a couple weeks ago is show you how our rotor and ground effect works. You're going to experience the same thing, but because of how much collective this thing requires to stay airborne, it gets very, it's almost more precise, and that's kind of the best way to describe it. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and proceed nice and gently here, and you can see a little tiny corrections on my part. It's like I said, gonna want to kind of run away from you. It has that translational lift, almost probably a little exaggerated, and that's okay. So this looks like a good spot right here. I'm going to go ahead and bring my right down. Again, give it just a tiny tug as you do this. I always struggle here. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and bring it back in. I'm just going to give it just a little bit of left foot here. I'm just going to let it settle. Watch out for that little bump of lift there that you get when you do that. All right, we're going to pick a point on the horizon, and we're just going to keep the point on the horizon in the same spot on the screen. And we're just going to settle in just like that. And now we're back from which we came. Not bad. Absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. This thing is such a trip. Wish the frame rate was a little better, but that might just be my fault. So to shut this thing down, really, really simple. We have a couple little things we do that's a little different than regular aircraft here. One thing is we can't just run this thing full blast all the time. We got to let it kind of settle down. So I'm going to try to play with my pitch control here. This is my throttle. And just sort of reduce it. And then I'm going to go ahead and pop off the governor here. The best thing here is when you pop off the governor, get ready to catch it because it likes to run away on you. In the real world, of course, because this is a regular conventional engine that we've literally been running that hot this entire time, you just want to make sure you give this thing some time to cool off. And one of the standard procedures for any helicopter is basically a cool down phase where we run everything down nice and gently and let everything gently come down to temperature before we just cut everything and let it go and basically fail on us. But other than that, it's a relatively straightforward procedure. I'm going to go ahead and bring the RPM down a little bit. We'll assume it's been 2.5 minutes to go ahead and get everything cooled off. I can actually cut it, and this thing has plenty of inertia. We'll have no difficulty. And if you want to be a terrible person, you can actually raise the collective, and it'll cause the rotor blades to actually slow down faster. Don't do that. That's naughty. Bad. Most helicopters today actually have big rotor brakes, which make this a little bit safer for process. Once, of course, we've let everything cool down, it's just a matter of reducing our mixture. And we've got a big handy mixture control here. And all we're going to do is we're just going to gently reduce that. RPM will come up just a little bit. And then when we cut it off, you'll notice that it comes off very, very, very quickly. Give it just a few minutes. That's a very fast decelerating rotor blade. I'm actually kind of surprised about that. Once that has stopped moving, pretend it stopped moving. It stopped moving, right? I don't see it. It's definitely stopped moving. You can tell it stopped moving. Then go ahead and disengage your magneto, pop off your two switches just like that, and enjoy.